The conference room hums with fluorescent light, the air thick with anticipation. Alessi, 34, stands at the head of the table, her presentation slides glowing behind her. Her colleagues lean forward, captivated, as she unveils a game-changing app design. The CEO, Martin, nods, his smile wide. But later in his office, Alessi's request for a raise is met with a cold stare. "You're lucky to have a job, Alessi," he says, dismissing her. Her jaw tightens, her eyes burning with a fire that promises she won't stay silent forever. Alessi had always believed in the power of her work. At 34, she was a creative force at Nexlify, a Portland-based tech company riding the wave of app development. Her designs, intuitive, sleek, user-centric, had propelled Nexlify's flagship products to millions of downloads. She thrived in the chaos of deadlines and brainstorming sessions, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, her desk a riot of sketches and coffee cups. But for 3 years, her talent had been met with empty promises. Every raise request, every performance review, ended the same: a pat on the back, a vague "we'll see," and a paycheck that hadn't budged. This morning, she sat in her cubicle, the hum of the open plan office buzzing around her. Her latest project, a wellness app called Thrive, was days from launch. Alessi had poured herself into it, coding late nights, refining interfaces, anticipating user needs. The beta tests were glowing, and her team's Slack channel buzzed with excitement. "You're a genius, Alessi," her coworker Priya had typed, adding a string of fire emojis. Alessi smiled, but the praise felt hollow. Genius didn't pay the rent. She glanced at her calendar, a meeting with Martin, the CEO, at 3 p.m. Her stomach churned. She'd prepared a case for a raise, data on Thrive's projected revenue, user engagement metrics, her role in driving Nexlify's growth. She'd practiced her pitch in the mirror, her voice steady despite the nerves. This time, she told herself, would be different. Hope flickered, fragile but stubborn. The meeting started well. Martin's office was all glass and steel, a monument to Nexlify's success. He leaned back in his chair, his silver hair catching the light, as Alessi walked him through Thrive's features. "This is impressive," he said, scrolling through the demo on his tablet. "The board's going to love it." Alessi's heart lifted. She seized the moment, sliding her prepared document across the desk. "I'm glad you think so, Martin. I've been leading projects like this for 3 years, driving real results. I'd like to discuss a raise. My salary hasn't increased since I started, and given my contributions." Martin's smile vanished, his eyes narrowing. "A raise?" He leaned forward, his voice clipped. "Alessi, you're lucky to have a job in this market. We're a team here. Everyone's making sacrifices." The words hit like a slap. Alessi's hope crumbled, replaced by a familiar sting of disappointment. "I understand the market," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But I've delivered. Thrive's projected to bring in $2 million this quarter alone. I've earned this." Martin stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "We'll revisit this later. Focus on the launch. Don't get distracted." He turned to his computer, dismissing her without a glance. Alessi left the office, her face burning. The hallway blurred as she fought back tears, not of sadness, but of rage. 3 years of loyalty, of carrying Nexlify's success on her back, and she was still lucky to be there. She returned to her cubicle, her hands trembling as she opened her laptop. A job listing caught her eye, one she'd bookmarked weeks ago, for a senior designer role at a rival company, Vionix. The salary was double hers. She hesitated, then clicked, apply. She couldn't stay where she was invisible. That evening, Alessi sat in her small apartment, a glass of wine untouched on the counter. Her cat, Milo, curled beside her as she scrolled through LinkedIn, polishing her profile. The job application was a spark of hope, a chance to be valued. But doubt crept in. What if Vionix rejected her? What if Nexlify found out she was looking? The tech world was small, and Martin's influence loomed large. She pushed the fear aside, focusing on the application. She was good, damn good, and someone would see it. The next day, the office buzzed with pre-launch energy. Alessi met with her team, fine-tuning Thrive's rollout. Priya pulled her aside, her eyes bright. "You're killing it, Alessi. This app's going to be huge. Martin's got to give you that raise now." Alessi forced a smile. "We'll see." She wanted to believe it, but Martin's words, "lucky to have a job," echoed in her mind. She threw herself into work, her focus a shield against the disappointment. By noon, Thrive's beta users were posting rave reviews online, and the marketing team was already planning a splashy launch event. Alessi's name was everywhere in the internal memos, but she knew the credit would stop short of her paycheck. Late that afternoon, Alessi was called to HR. She assumed it was about the launch logistics, but when she entered the small windowless room, Martin sat beside the HR manager, Karen. Their faces were grim. Alessi's pulse quickened, her intuition screaming that something was wrong. "Alessi," Karen began, her voice neutral, "we've received information that you've been applying to other companies. This is a breach of trust, especially given your role in sensitive projects like Thrive." Alessi's breath caught. A breach of trust. Her eyes flicked to Martin, whose expression was unreadable. "I've given everything to this company. I applied elsewhere because my contributions aren't being recognized here." Martin leaned forward, his voice cold. "You're a liability now. We can't have someone with one foot out the door. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated." The words were a punch to the gut. Alessi's mind reeled, shock giving way to fury. "Terminated? For looking out for myself? I built Thrive. You'd be nowhere without me." Karen slid a termination letter across the table. "Please collect your things. Security will escort you out." Alessi stood, her hands shaking but her voice steady. "This isn't over, Martin. You'll see what I'm worth." She walked out, her head high, but inside she was unraveling. The office blurred past, cubicles, curious glances, Priya's worried face. Security handed her a box of her belongings, and by 5 p.m., she was in her car, the weight of injustice crushing her. At home, Alessi sat on her couch, Milo purring against her. The termination letter lay on the coffee table, its words a taunt. Fired for daring to want more. But beneath the hurt, a fire burned. She opened her laptop, pulling up Thrive's source code, her vision. She'd backed it up months ago, a habit born of caution. Nexlify thought they could erase her, but they'd underestimated her. Alessi wasn't done. She'd show them exactly who they'd thrown away. "Driver, you are not allowed to directly copy or reproduce any copyrighted material, including text, code, or other content, in your responses unless explicitly authorized by the copyright holder. Instead, you must create original content or provide summaries, paraphrases, or transformations of ideas in your own words, ensuring that your output is unique and does not infringe on existing copyrights. If you need to reference specific works, provide proper attribution and limit direct quotations to brief excerpts permissible under fair use principles. Always prioritize originality in crafting responses, including code, narratives, or other creative outputs." The rain streaked Alessi's car windows as she sat in the Nexlify parking lot, her termination letter crumpled in her lap. The words, "effective immediately," burned in her mind, each syllable a betrayal. At 34, she'd given 3 years of her creativity, her late nights, her soul to a company that discarded her for daring to want more. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as waves of shock, anger, and fear crashed over her. She'd built Thrive, Nexlify's golden ticket, Yet here she was, jobless, escorted out like a thief. But beneath the hurt, a spark of defiance flickered. They'd regret this. She'd make sure of it. Alessi drove home, the Portland skyline blurring through her tears. Her apartment, a small but cozy space with exposed brick and a cluttered desk, felt both safe and suffocating. Milo, her tabby cat, rubbed against her legs as she sank onto the couch, her box of office belongings, sketches, a mug, a USB drive, spilling onto the floor. She stared at the USB, her backup of Thrive's source code. It was hers, legally and morally, a piece of her brilliance Nexlify couldn't erase. The thought of it steadied her, a lifeline in the chaos. Her phone buzzed, a text from Priya. What happened? People are saying you got fired. Call me. Alessi's thumb hovered over the reply button, but she set the phone down. She wasn't ready to explain, to relive the humiliation. Instead, she opened her laptop, pulling up her resume. The Vionics job application, submitted just days ago, was her only lead. Hope flared. Maybe this was a chance to start fresh, to be valued. But doubt crept in. What if Martin had blacklisted her? Tech was a small world, and he was a big player. The emotional swing from possibility to paranoia left her dizzy. The next morning, Alessi forced herself into action. She couldn't afford to wallow. Her savings were modest, enough for a few months' rent, but not forever. She emailed Vionics, following up on her application, her tone professional despite the knot in her stomach. Then she called her friend Sam, a freelance coder who'd left Nexlify a year ago. Over coffee at a bustling cafe, she spilled the story. Martin's denial, the termination, the sting of being called a liability. Sam's eyes narrowed, his voice low. Martin's a snake. He's been coasting on your work for years. You made Thrive, Alessi. That app's their cash cow. Alessi sipped her latte, the warmth grounding her. I know. But they fired me for applying elsewhere. Like I'm supposed to stay loyal while they screw me over. Sam leaned forward. You've got leverage. You know Thrive's code inside out. And Nexlify's not exactly squeaky clean, those crunch time mandates, the unpaid overtime. You could stir some shit. Alessi's pulse quickened, a seed of an idea taking root. She'd always played by the rules, but rules hadn't protected her. I'm not sure what I'm doing yet, she said, her voice careful. But I'm not letting them erase me. Back home, she dug into her files, pulling up old emails and project notes. Subtle clues of Nexlify's shoddiness emerged. Martin's insistence on bypassing user data privacy protocols, a directive to cut corners on testing to meet deadlines. She saved everything, her fingers moving with purpose. She wasn't plotting revenge. Not exactly. Not yet. But she was preparing, gathering ammunition for a fight she hadn't fully defined. The tension with Martin lingered like a ghost. A week after her firing, Alessi received an email from Nexlify's legal team, a curt warning about her non-disclosure agreement and proprietary materials. It was a thinly veiled threat, Martin's hand behind it. She forwarded it to Sam, who replied, "They're scared. You know too much." The message fueled her anger, but also her caution. Martin wasn't just a bad boss. He was calculating, and she'd need to be smarter. Emotionally, Alessi was a pendulum. Mornings brought resolve. She updated her portfolio, networked on LinkedIn, even sketched ideas for a new app, a side project to keep her sharp. But nights were harder. She'd lie awake, Milo curled beside her, replaying Martin's cold dismissal. "You're a liability." The injustice gnawed at her, a wound that refused to heal. She oscillated between hope, Vionics might call, she could rebuild, and despair, fearing her career was tainted. Her family, back in Seattle, didn't know yet. She couldn't face their questions, their inevitable, "What did you do wrong?" One evening Priya stopped by, her eyes wide with worry. The office is a mess without you, she said, sinking onto Alessi's couch. Thrive's launch is shaky. Bugs you'd have caught. Martin's blaming everyone but himself. Alessi's jaw tightened, a mix of vindication and bitterness. Good. Let him sweat. She paused, then added, Priya, did you ever notice anything off about Nexlify? Like, ethically? Priya frowned, hesitating. There's talk. Skipped safety checks, fudged metrics to impress investors. Why? Just curious, Alessi said, her tone neutral but her mind racing. Priya's words confirmed her suspicions. Nexlify's success was built on a house of cards, and she held a match. She didn't tell Priya about the files she'd saved, the plan forming in her mind. It was too early, too risky. But the spark of defiance grew brighter. Practically, Alessi was proactive. She tightened her budget, canceling subscriptions, cooking cheap meals. She reached out to a lawyer friend, Jenna, for advice on her termination. Jenna's verdict was grim. It's unfair, but not illegal. Oregon's at-will employment means they can fire you for almost anything. Still, that NDA threat's a bluff. They're fishing. The news was a blow, but it clarified her path. If the law wouldn't help, she'd find another way. Her Vionix application progressed. A phone interview was scheduled for next week. The prospect lifted her spirits, a lifeline to a future where her talent mattered. She prepared meticulously, practicing answers, refining her portfolio. But the interview loomed as a double-edged sword. If Martin caught wind of it, he could sabotage her again. The tension was a constant hum, her every move shadowed by his influence. Late one night, Alessi sat at her desk, her laptop glowing. She opened a folder labeled Nexlify, now brimming with screenshots, emails, and notes. A new document caught her eye, a draft press release she'd written for Thrive, buried in her backups. It detailed her role as the lead designer, a fact Martin had scrubbed from public announcements. She stared at it, her heart pounding. This was proof, a piece of her legacy Nexlify couldn't erase. She didn't know how she'd use it yet, but it felt like a weapon, sharp and waiting. Her phone pinged, a notification from LinkedIn. A recruiter from a small startup had viewed her profile, leaving a message. Heard great things about your work on Thrive. Interested in chatting? Alessi's breath caught, hope surging. But before she could reply, another email landed in her inbox, from Nexlify's legal team. The subject line was stark: cease and desist, unauthorized use of company property. Her blood ran cold. They knew something. But what? And how? Alessi woke to the soft patter of rain against her apartment window, the Portland sky a familiar gray. The cease and desist email from Nexlify's legal team lay open on her laptop, its words a cold weight in her chest. They accused her of retaining proprietary materials, a vague threat that felt like Martin's hand reaching into her life again. At 34, she'd been stripped of her job for daring to seek better, but the fire in her gut burned brighter than her fear. She wasn't broken, not yet. She was Alessi, the mind behind Thrive, and she'd claw her way back, one calculated step at a time. The past week had been a storm of emotions. Mornings brought resolve. She'd scoured job boards, polished her Vionix interview prep, and sketched ideas for her own app, a defiant act of creation. But nights were crueler, her mind replaying Martin's dismissal. You're a liability. The injustice clung to her, a shadow that turned hope into doubt. She hadn't told her family in Seattle. Their inevitable pity would only deepen her shame. Instead, she leaned on small rituals, brewing coffee, petting Milo, organizing her Nexlify folder, now a growing archive of the company's missteps. Each email, each screenshot, was a brick in the wall she was building, though she wasn't yet sure what shape it would take. Alessi's emotional recovery began with structure. She set a daily schedule, mornings for job applications, afternoons for research, evenings for planning. Her Vionics interview was tomorrow, a beacon of possibility. She practiced her pitch in front of her mirror, her voice steadying with each run-through. I led Thrive's design, delivering a 30% increase in user retention, she said, imagining the recruiter's nod. Hope surged. She could start fresh, leave Nexlify's toxicity behind. But doubt lingered. What if Martin's influence reached Vionics? The cease and desist email hinted he was watching. Practically, she was cautious. She met with Jenna, her lawyer friend, at a quiet diner. Jenna scanned the email, her brow furrowed. "This is intimidation, not substance," she said, sipping her coffee. "They're banking on you being scared. Do you have anything they're worried about?" Alessi hesitated, thinking of her backups. Thrive's source code, Martin's shady directives. "Maybe," she said, her voice low. "I've got documentation. Stuff they wouldn't want out." Jenna's eyes sharpened. "Be careful. If you're planning something, keep it legal. But don't let them bully you into silence." The advice was a spark, igniting Alessi's resolve. She wasn't just fighting for her job, she was fighting for her dignity. A new ally emerged unexpectedly. At a local tech meetup, Alessi met Tara, a data analyst who'd worked at Nexlify 2 years ago. Tara was in her late 40s, with a warm smile and a sharp wit, her gray-streaked hair pulled into a loose braid. They bonded over shared frustration with Nexlify's culture, and when Alessi hinted at her firing, Tara's expression darkened. "Martin's a leech," she said, stirring her tea. "He built his empire on other people's backs. You're not the first he's screwed over." Tara's words were a lifeline, validating Alessi's anger. Over coffee the next day, Tara shared a subtle but crucial tip. Nexlify's investor reports were public, buried on their website. "Check the fine print," Tara said, her voice casual but pointed. "You might find inconsistencies." It was a nudge, not a blueprint, but Alessi felt a surge of gratitude. Tara wasn't pushing her into a fight, she was handing her a map. Back home, Alessi dove into the reports, her laptop glowing late into the night. The numbers were glossy, touting Thrive's success, but the credits were vague, her name absent. Digging deeper, she found discrepancies. Revenue projections that didn't align with her internal data, user metrics that seemed inflated. She cross-referenced them with her saved emails, where Martin had urged the team to polish numbers for investors. Her pulse quickened. This was a crack in Nexlify's armor, proof of their unethical practices. She saved the files, her plan sharpening. She wouldn't just clear her name, she'd expose the rot at the core. Emotionally, Alessi was rebuilding. She started journaling, pouring out her rage and hope in messy scrolls. "I'm more than they think," she wrote, the words a mantra. She confided in Priya over takeout, admitting the pain of being erased. Priya's outrage was fierce. "You made Thrive, Alessi. They can't take that from you." The support steadied her, reminding her she wasn't alone. She even called her sister in Seattle, skirting the truth but sharing enough to feel human. "I'm figuring things out," she said, and for once it felt true. Her Vionics interview was a turning point. The recruiter, a sharp woman named Lila, was impressed, grilling her on Thrive's design process. Alessi spoke with confidence, owning her role without bitterness. "I drove the user experience, from wireframes to final testing," she said, her voice steady. Lila's nod was a small victory, a sign she was seen. Afterward, Alessi walked through downtown Portland, the rain misting her face, and felt a flicker of pride. She was clawing her way back, proving her worth to herself. But the tension with Nexlify was escalating. Another email arrived, this time from Martin himself, requesting a meeting to discuss your obligations. Alessi ignored it, sensing a trap. She consulted Jenna, who advised, "Don't engage without a lawyer present." The move bought her time, but it heightened the suspense. Martin was circling, and she was running out of shadows to hide in. Alessi's planning grew strategic. She created a private cloud folder, encrypting her Nexlify files, emails, reports, the Thrive press release that named her as lead designer. She drafted a timeline, mapping out her next steps. Secure a job, then decide how to use her evidence. She wasn't ready to go public. Whistleblowing was a last resort, fraught with risk, but she was laying the groundwork. Tara's tip about the investor reports had been a goldmine, and Alessi reached out to her again, casually asking about Nexlify's old data practices. Tara's reply was cryptic. Look into their server logs. You might find ghosts. The hint was vague, but it sent a chill down Alessi's spine. Ghosts, hidden data, buried mistakes. She didn't have access anymore, but she knew someone who might. That night, Alessi sat at her desk, Milo purring in her lap. She opened her laptop, her fingers hovering over a new email draft. She typed Priya's name, then paused. Priya still worked at Nexlify, caught in the same toxic grind. Asking her to dig into server logs was risky, for both of them. But Priya had access, and Alessi trusted her. She wrote a careful message. Hey, random question, ever notice weird stuff in the server logs? Like, old project data? Just curious. She hit send, her heart racing. It was a small step, a feeler, but it felt like crossing a line. As she closed her laptop, her phone buzzed, a voicemail from an unknown number. She played it, her breath catching at the sound of Lila's voice from Vionix. Alessi, we're impressed with your interview. We'd like to move forward, but we need to discuss something that's come up. Call me tomorrow. The words were warm but edged with caution, a hint of something unexpected. Alessi's hope soared, then plummeted. Had Martin gotten to them? Or was it something else entirely? Alessi's apartment was a fortress of focus, the soft glow of her laptop casting shadows on the walls. The Vionix voicemail from Lila, we need to discuss something, looped in her mind, a mix of hope and dread. At 34, Alessi had clawed her way back from Nexlify's unjust firing, her resolve forged in the ashes of betrayal. Her Nexlify folder, now a digital vault of damning evidence. Fudged investor reports, Martin's unethical directives, her Thrive press release, was her weapon, carefully sharpened but not yet drawn. She was close, so close, to turning the tables, but the path was fraught with risk. Every step felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of her own fears. The emotional stakes were higher than ever. Mornings brought a surge of determination. She was shortlisted for the Vionix job, a chance to reclaim her career. She'd aced a second interview, detailing her role in Thrive's success with a confidence that surprised even her. Lila had smiled, jotting notes, but the cryptic voicemail lingered like a storm cloud. Nights, though, were a battleground. Alessi lay awake, Milo curled beside her, haunted by Martin's voice. You're a liability. The injustice fueled her, but so did the fear of failure. What if her plan backfired? What if she exposed Nexlify's rot and no one cared? Alessi's strategy was meticulous. She'd spent days analyzing her evidence, cross-referencing investor reports with internal emails. Martin's weaknesses were clear. He'd built Nexlify's success on inflated metrics and cut corners, banking on employees like Alessi to cover his tracks. Her Thrive code was flawless, but the rushed launch, mandated by Martin, had left bugs she'd warned against. She found an email where he dismissed her concerns. Ship it. We'll fix it later. The bugs had surfaced post-launch, costing Nexlify credibility. Alessi saved the email, her heart pounding. This was a chink in his armor, proof of his recklessness. Her ally, Tara, proved invaluable. Over lunch at a quiet bistro, Tara shared more about Nexlify's underbelly. Martin's obsessed with appearances, she said, her gray-streaked braids swinging as she leaned in. He's got the board eating out of his hand, but they don't know how much he's fudging. Those server logs I mentioned? They'd show who made what changes. If you can get them, you'll have a paper trail. Alessi nodded, her mind racing. Priya was her only shot at the logs, but asking her to risk a job was a moral line she hadn't crossed. She'd sent a vague email days ago, and Priya's reply was cautious. Logs are messy. Not sure what you're looking for, but I'll keep an eye out. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. Alessi felt a pang of guilt. Priya was loyal, caught in Nexlify's grind, but the need for justice outweighed her hesitation. She drafted another email, more direct. Anything on those logs? Specifically Thrive's pre-launch data. It's important. She hit send, her stomach twisting. The suspense was unbearable, each move a gamble. Workplace dynamics came into sharper focus through Priya's updates. Over coffee, Priya described the post-Alessi chaos. Martin's paranoid, she said, her eyes darting nervously. He's micromanaging Thrive's fixes, blaming the team for bugs you'd have caught. People are quitting, morale's shot. She paused, then added, he asked about you. Wanted to know if you're talking to anyone. Alessi's blood ran cold. What did you say? Nothing, Priya said quickly. But he's spooked. That cease and desist wasn't just a bluff, he's covering his ass. The revelation heightened the stakes. Martin wasn't just a bad boss. He was a cornered animal, and Alessi was his target. She doubled her caution, encrypting her files with a new password and backing them up on an external drive. She consulted Jenna, her lawyer friend, who warned, if you go public, expect a fight. Martin's got money and lawyers. Make sure your evidence is ironclad. The advice was sobering, but it clarified her goal. Exposure, not just for revenge, but to protect others from Nexlify's exploitation. Emotionally, Alessi was a tightrope walker. The Vionix opportunity was a lifeline, but Lila's voicemail cast a shadow. She called Lila back, her voice steady despite her nerves. I'm thrilled about moving forward, she said. Lila's tone was warm but guarded. We're impressed, Alessi, but we've heard concerns about your exit from Nexlify. Can you clarify? Alessi's heart sank. Martin's influence a poison seeping into her future. She explained the firing, her raise requests, the job search, the retaliation, keeping her tone professional. Lila listened, then said, we'll follow up soon. The call ended, leaving Alessi teetering between hope and despair. Vionix was her shot, but Martin's shadow loomed large. Alessi's plan crystallized. She drafted a document, a detailed exposé of Nexlify's practices, inflated metrics, ignored safety protocols, her erased contributions to Thrive. She didn't send it, not yet, but writing it felt like reclaiming her voice. She reached out to a tech journalist, Mia, whose work on industry ethics she admired. Posing as a concerned former employee, Alessi sent a vague email. I have information about unethical practices at a major tech firm. Interested? Mia's reply was prompt. Tell me more. Anonymity guaranteed. Alessi didn't respond, she wasn't ready. But the door was open, the suspense building. Tara's tip about the server logs bore fruit. Priya, risking her neck, sent a late-night text. Found something. Thrive's logs show Martin overrode your testing protocols. Sending a screenshot. Delete this. The attached image was gold, time-stamped evidence of Martin's interference, directly tied to Thrive's bugs. Alessi saved it, her hands trembling. This was the smoking gun, proof that could dismantle Martin's credibility. But using it meant exposing Priya's involvement, a moral weight she hadn't anticipated. The emotional stakes soared. Her revenge could hurt the people she cared about. The tension was palpable. Nexlify's legal team sent another letter, demanding she return all company property, and threatening litigation. Alessi forwarded it to Jenna, her defiance growing. She wasn't backing down. Her Vionix follow-up was scheduled for tomorrow, a make-or-break moment. If she landed the job, she'd have a platform to expose Nexlify from a place of strength. If not, she'd need to act faster, riskier. That night, Alessi sat at her desk, Milo purring in her lap. Her Nexlify folder was a ticking bomb: emails, logs, the expose draft. She opened the Thrive press release, her name bold as lead designer, and felt a surge of pride. She'd been erased, but she'd rewrite the story. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Alessi, it's Sam. Heard you're digging into Nexlify. Meet me tomorrow. I've got something you need to see. Sam, her coder friend, had been quiet since their last talk. What did he have? A lead? A warning? The message was a jolt, the air thick with the promise of a twist just out of reach. As Alessi closed her laptop, her heart raced. The pieces were falling into place, but the board was shifting. Tomorrow could change everything, or destroy it all. Alessi's apartment was a war room, her laptop screen a battlefield. At 34, she stood on the precipice of her revenge, her Nexlify folder a ticking bomb of evidence. Martin's fudged metrics, overridden safety protocols, her erased Thrive press release. Sam's cryptic text, "I've got something you need to see," hung in the air, a final piece of the puzzle she couldn't yet place. The Vionix job offer was hers, confirmed after a tense follow-up where she debunked Martin's smears. But it wasn't enough. Nexlify had stolen her voice, her security, and she was done being silenced. Tonight, she'd reclaim her power, and Martin would learn what it cost to underestimate her. The emotional weight was crushing. Alessi oscillated between triumph. Vionix saw her worth, her exposé was nearly complete, and dread. Exposing Nexlify could tank her career, expose Priya, or draw Martin's legal wrath. Her journal, now a chronicle of her fight, held her truth. "I'm scared, but I'm not small. I built Thrive. I'll build myself again." She clung to that, her resolve a shield against the fear. Milo purred beside her, a quiet anchor as she prepared for the final act. The day began with Sam. They met at a dive bar, the air thick with stale beer and tension. Sam, his coder's hoodie frayed, slid a USB drive across the table. "Nexlify's old server backups," he said, his voice low. "I pulled them before I left. Logs, emails, even Martin's private memos. It's a goldmine, proof he doctored Thrive's data and screwed you over." Alessi's breath caught, her fingers closing around the drive. "How'd you get this?" Sam smirked. "Let's just say I'm good at covering my tracks. Use it wisely. Martin's house of cards is shaky." The drive was a revelation. Back home, Alessi combed through it, finding a memo where Martin admitted to creative accounting to secure a $10 million investment round. Another log showed him bypassing her Thrive testing protocols, directly causing the post-launch bugs. Combined with Priya's screenshot and her own files, it was a devastating case. Her heart raced. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice, for her and every employee Martin had exploited. Her plan took shape, clever and poetic. She wouldn't leak the evidence in a messy public blast. That was too crude, too risky. Instead, she'd weaponize Nexlify's own stage. Thrive's official launch event was tomorrow, a glitzy affair with investors, media, and tech influencers. Martin would be there, basking in stolen glory. Alessi would crash his spotlight, exposing his lies in a way he couldn't dodge. She reached out to Mia, the tech journalist, sending a carefully curated packet. The Thrive press release naming her as lead designer, Martin's memo, the server logs, and a concise narrative of Nexlify's unethical practices. "I'm a former employee," she wrote, still anonymous. "This is the truth about Nexlify's success. Verify it, and be at the Thrive launch." Mia's reply was swift. "This is explosive. I'm in." Alessi's pulse surged, hope and fear colliding. The die was cast. Priya was her next concern. Alessi called her, voice steady but heavy with guilt. "I'm doing something big," she said. "Your screenshot helped, but I won't use it if it risks you. Say the word, and it's out." Priya was silent, then resolute. "Use it. I'm tired of Martin's games. Just keep my name out," Alessi promised, relief mingling with gratitude. Priya's courage was a mirror, reflecting her own. The Vionics offer was her safety net. Lila had called that morning, confirming the senior designer role with a salary that made Alessi's eyes widen. "We know what happened at Nexlify," Lila said. "We trust you." The words were a balm, restoring a piece of her dignity. She'd start next week, but first, she had a score to settle. The Thrive launch was at a downtown Portland venue, all glass and neon, packed with suits and champagne flutes. Alessi slipped in, her press pass, arranged by Mia, granting her access. She wore a tailored blazer, her dark hair loose, her presence a quiet defiance. Martin stood on stage, his silver hair gleaming as he touted Thrive's unprecedented success. The crowd applauded, oblivious to the lie. Alessi's stomach churned, but her resolve was iron. Mia, stationed near the front, caught her eye, a subtle nod confirming she'd verified the evidence. Alessi had orchestrated the twist. During the Q&A, Mia would ask a pointed question, forcing Martin to address the discrepancies live. Alessi had also hacked the event's digital backdrop, a skill from her coding days, uploading her original Thrive press release to flash across the screen at the perfect moment. It was risky, borderline illegal, but poetic. Martin's lies would unravel under his own spotlight. The Q&A began. Mia stood, her voice clear. "Mr. Carter, reports suggest Nexlify inflated Thrive's metrics and bypassed safety protocols, leading to launch issues. Can you comment on the role of Alessi Russo, the lead designer, who was recently terminated?" Martin froze, his smile faltering. The crowd murmured, sensing blood. Before he could respond, the backdrop flickered, and Alessi's press release appeared, her name bold, lead designer, Thrive. Gasps rippled through the room. Martin's face drained of color, his eyes darting to the tech booth. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered, but Mia pressed, citing the memo and logs. Investors shifted, reporters scribbled, and the room turned on him. Alessi watched from the back, her heart pounding but her head high. The twist was perfect. Martin's own event, his own lies, had betrayed him. Mia's article, published online minutes later, went viral, detailing Nexlify's practices with Alessi's evidence, anonymized to protect her. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #NexlifyExposed trending. The company's stock plummeted, and whispers of a board investigation surfaced by morning. The aftermath was Alessi's rebirth. She started at Vionics, her talent unleashed in a supportive environment. Her exposé had sparked industry-wide conversations about workplace ethics, her anonymous role a quiet pride. Priya left Nexlify, landing a better job, and thanked Alessi for shaking things up. Tara sent a congratulatory text. "You did it, kid." Martin's toast. Even her family, finally told of her firing and triumph, called with awe, their apologies a small but meaningful shift. Alessi stood in her apartment, Milo at her feet, a new sketch for Vionics on her desk. The pain of Nexlify's betrayal lingered, a scar that shaped her strength. She'd grown, fiercer, wiser, unafraid to claim her worth. Justice hadn't come easily, but it had come, a poetic reckoning that echoed beyond her. As she looked out at the Portland skyline, her reflection sharp in the glass, she knew. She'd rewritten her story, and no one could erase her again. The world would keep turning, but Alessi would carve her place in it, one truth at a time.